capital. Now, as the situation on the job front seems to be looking slightly more promising for South Africans, with 15.3 million people employed, as mentioned in President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address. The number of South Africans living in poverty has actually increased since 2010. A recent poverty report from Statistics South Africa shows that 21.5% of South Africans now live below the poverty line. Now, to talk to us about some of the report's finding, we are joined in the capital by Statistics South Africa's Statistician-General, Mr. Pali Lehohla. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning, listeners. I am the Statistician-General of South Africa, not the Statistician-General of Stats SA.
Apologies for that oversight there. So just tell us about the findings of your report. What do you think are the most important things that came out of this report?
Well, we have mentioned the report on employment, which shows that 15.3 million South Africans are now, or people in South Africa are now employed, also reducing unemployment to about 24.1%. That is also produced by Statistics South Africa, and the poverty report is similarly. I think there are two things that have to be corrected. Poverty, as a result of rebasing, showed that the bar was much higher now than we ever knew, therefore resulting in showing more people living in poverty than what we knew before. So there has been a rebasing process. And it is not that there are more people between 2010 and now that are living in poverty. It's just as of 2010, the bar that we have used shows that there were more people living in poverty than we knew before. It was 20% when we measured then before. After rebasing, we realized that it is 21.5. Over time, poverty has actually been reducing, whichever scale you use, whether it's a rebased or a pre-based, rebased schedule. Poverty in South Africa has been reducing, particularly at those lower ends of poverty, food poverty line.
Can you explain to us how the poverty line is determined, what that means, and what does it mean if you are below that poverty line that we hear about?
Measurement of poverty is an important measurement in that one of the key objectives, both of Millennium Development Goals and the post-2015 agenda, is to reduce poverty. In fact, the post-2015 agenda argues that no one should be left behind, thus meaning that poverty must be eliminated. National governments themselves and states fight poverty all the time. In South Africa, the NDP, National Development Plan, sets target of eliminating poverty by 2030. So in order to know that we are on track, we have to measure this poverty. Poverty is actually measured in many ways. In the report that we have produced, we are measuring poverty from a money metric point of view, and we determine a poverty line. And the poverty line, food poverty line, is determined on the set of food items that households consume. And the poor have a particular diet. You will need 2,100 calories to stay alive per person per day. And you convert that into a monthly requirement of income to purchase those goods and services, those food items that appear in the basket. That's how you determine the food poverty line. Then there are other lower bound line above food poverty, and then the upper bound line above food line poverty. Those lines help in measuring what kinds of sacrifices. The system has just gone off in Pretoria. I don't know whether there is load shedding.
Well, you can continue talking. Poverty. We've got pictures running over. So just tell us, I just want to ask you, the president talked about 15.3 million people employed in South Africa. But if you are employed in this country, Does it mean that you are automatically lifted out of poverty, or are we seeing employed people battling with the scourge?
Well, I think we know that there is employment, there is employment. The level of income that people who are in employment receive may not necessarily lift them out of poverty. That is why now the ILO standard of measuring employment includes those that are a decent work. And decent work has to relate to how people who are employed find their environment, both in terms of the level of salaries that they receive, the benefits that come with it, and the general environment in which they function.
Quickly, sir, I can...
So it does happen that even those who are employed, they may live below poverty for as long as they do not achieve a 335 rands per person per month.
I wanted to ask you in conclusion, sir, if you can just paint the picture for us. How are we faring compared to the rest of the world, and maybe even compared to the rest of the continent?
Well, I mean, the South African economy is one which relies on employment largely for survival. The rest of the continent, production of crops and the like, are part and parcel of what people grow to sustain their lives. In South Africa, it is not so, because agriculture and agricultural production is in the hands of commercial farmers, largely. And by and large, peasant production has been destroyed. So the direct comparison is not very possible. We may compare with Brazil, and in the case of Brazil, you'll find that there is a lot of peasant production in farming, whereas in South Africa not. But the South African government has provided a cushion that ensures that people don't fall below the bread line. Yeah. Despite that, we still have 21% below that bread line.
I thank you for joining us today. Pity about the load shedding there in the capital. I'm sure that the link has been restored. That's the Statistician-General of South Africa, Mr. Pali Lehohla, joining us to talk about the threat of poverty after this report came out that, well, 21.5, or in practical terms, just over 1 out of every 5 South Africa is threatened or lives underneath the poverty line.